Engineering, ICER Bhopal, and he supervises the Geo AI Research Lab, which develops AI-based technologies to solve urban problems. So he's also has broad experience in spatial data modeling, machine learning, 3D GIS, and today we are thankful that he will also be giving us an exposure of using UAVs and machine learning in urban planning and spatial planning and development. So, thank you, Vaibhav, for accepting our invitation to join us to our FDP. And you over to you. You can brief about the talk content of today's talk and how would we go about tutorials also.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it was a very nice introduction, and I'm very happy to be presenting a topic here because I think everybody has attended some part of spatial modeling or geospatial tech. They must have been exposure to geospatial technology in last two like days in
Yes.
the trend. So
Yes.
I think it will be very easy for me to explain the things. So I will share my slides and then I will show the outlines that we will be covering in this presentation.
Sure.
Okay, so I hope you all have seen UAV. So it's unmanned aerial vehicle, and if not in any other technical domain, you must have seen it in marriages or in making blogs. So people nowadays use UAVs for making blogs. But the idea of UAV was mostly residing in the domain of intelligence, surveillance, and it was mostly used in the warfare, just like the term artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence was also, it can be NASA and warfares can be credited to the development of artificial intelligence. It was not for the common public, or you can say the common companies who actually took ahead the AI paradigm, and then IBM took it from there. So all these both the terms UAV and AI have a kind of more or less same starting position. They were developed for intelligence and mostly they were used in warfares. Now they are being very kind of, we are in the phase where they have been very easy to access, and now we have geospatial policy in place. So we can now use UAVs for collecting the data and use it in planning. What I'll be covering in this presentation is that I will take you through the idea of UAV. So I'll be talking about what is a UAV. Then I will discuss what are the types of UAVs, and then we will see what are the components of UAVs, and then we will see what data it can produce, what data we get and what we work on, and then what is the end product of it, and then how it is being used in different planning purpose. And finally, we will also to understand the idea of how the processing part, how the information extraction is being done so that it can be employed in different kind of problem solving. We'll look at the specific case of artificial intelligence, and we'll be mostly looking into the idea of feature extraction. So AI, I'll talk about AI and what are its components, whether only the machine learning is component, or are there different AI paradigms which are being used in UV. So I'll be discussing those things. And um, for those who are not aware of machine learning, so we will be covering basics of machine learning. So at the end of the day, we'll be seeing the implementation of machine learning on UV data, and then I hope that you have uh, a kind of idea about what is machine learning and what is UAV, and then how it is being applied to UAV data, and how we extract the data sets, and how that can be used in planning. So let's start. And uh, before starting about the whole idea of UAV and their types, it's very important to understand that why we are switching to UAV, and mostly in coming 5 to 6 years, you will be, I believe, everyone will have their own sub UAV component in their. If they are working in remote sensing domain, they will have a remote sensing UAV components in their projects or anything which is related to research, because it will be very easily accessible, and then you will have a lot of data to play. There will be companies who will be giving you free data sets, so all this scenario will change, and I think that will happen faster than what I pointed out about 5 years. So why this is going means in this direction, why the craze of UAV is increasing? Because it's it lets you detect very small objects on the ground or anywhere in the space or anywhere. When we fly a UAV, then we get the data, and the data is a very it's a highly accurate data. So we have the centimeter resolution data sets, and now when we are moving into the phase when we want to do surveying through the tools which don't require much of resources at the ground. So in earlier times we had people employed for marking out ground control points which we used in our satellite imageries, and then in different applications, which then again produced high resolution maps, and then we use them in our problem solving. But now UAV is a tool which can help you capture the information of objects, the scenarios, the changes, the effects, all those things at very centimeter level without even the more or less collection of GCP points. So we are not much dependent upon GCP points, because it has a very high accurate, we can say a very accurate way of collecting the data. It has a IMU deployed on its platform, and then it calculates the actual location. So we'll see what are those components in the coming slides. Then the rise of one is generally because of the you can say the decline of the other factor, and the decline of other factor is aeroplanes and helicopters, which are very expensive. So if we go for an aeroplane or helicopter based surveys for generating a data which can be centimeter level accurate, it requires a lot of money and resources. So that's where UV comes into picture. You have a tool, you give a lot of inputs to it. Those inputs you will see in the coming slides, and then you have the data ready with you. It can support a lot of sensors. So when we talk about remote sensing, then we have different kind of sensors, and almost every sensor is being supported by UAV. So that gives us flexibility as well. So you have one tool, and you can just replace the sensor and fly it, collect the data, use it. So it's very simple. And then when we have high resolution data sets, when we require surveys which require high resolution mapping, then its application increases, and that's what we are moving into. So we are moving into the planning phase where we require very accurate data sets, and that's why this is one of the cause why UAV's role is increasing. But it also comes with some cons, and one of the cons is that it is generally suitable for small area surveys. So when you are flying a UAV, the area that it covers can be less. So if you are, let's say, planning for whole Bhopal, so it will be very difficult for you to fly a UAV and collect the data set for whole Bhopal. You can do it. It will be done in different phases, but that will be kind of a very expensive task, and it might be more expensive in that case when you have aeroplanes and helicopter deployed. So that's one con. So currently UAV is mostly used in collecting data in a smaller region where you have one, let's say, a flight of 45 minutes or 1 hour flight, and you want to fly your drone, and then it collects the data for you. So that's one of the cons, and that's a quote in the markets that once they fly, they will create a new market, and that was in 2013, and this quote is now becoming very relevant. So they are now flying, and they are creating a new market. In fact, it's predicted that around 50,000 crore will be the amount of money that will be involved in UAV based projects in the coming 2-3 years. So now moving to what are its components. So it's not just a tool, but it's just a system. And it's the system, when we say system, that means it has different modules. And here the modules are, let me see if I can have a laser pointer. Okay. So when I say different modules, so it has flight planner module, it has operational module, it has processing module, and the cockpits in the case of larger UAVs. So what we do is normally we have a UAV like this, and it has its GPS module, which uh, collects the coordinate of the location with which is it surveys. So I guess uh, I think what I will do is, what are the chances that we lost the connection with UAVs and that may result in damage of signal? I will come to those points. So there is a specific slide related to that, and we'll discuss that point. So if let's finish some part, and then we'll take the questions, and then I will detail that part. So that we have flight planner, and the flight planner is a specific module which is fed into UAV, and it's a two-way planning. So you have a software which controls UAV, where the processing is done on your side, the system side or the client side, and then there's another module where the planning is itself fed into UAV. So when we say that what are the chances that we lost the connection with UAVs and that may result in damage of civilian properties, absolutely there is a chance, but only when our UAV is controlled at our end, at the client end. Mostly that's now being done less. So in the current version of UAVs, the planning is being fed to the UAV, and it has its own path, its own plan, and it moves to that plan. Yes, the battery can drain, but all those things are taken care of. So mostly none of them has been reported till now. It has its controller, the remote controller, and this cockpit is a demonstration of how the UAV is controlled for a big UAV, and we will see what a big UAV is. And when we fly it, we get such processed products. So this is for agriculture area. So we are flying the UAV there. We are controlling it through using a flight planner. The UAV has its components, the components like the IMU components, which calculates its, which has its details, which keeps the detail of all the rotational parameters or the orientation parameters. Then it has GPS module, which keeps the information of where it is located, and then we find the look. Then we get the information of the data which it is collecting, and then in the planning, when it's done in the cockpit, it's something like this. And when the planning is being fed to the UAV, it's fed in the form of this kind of planning module, and it's fed into the UAV. So it's pre or during kind of planning module. And that's one of the also a good benefit of UAV, because when you have aeroplanes or helicopters, you don't control it kind of in a automatic way. So it might deviate from its path, and so it has a lot of those challenges as well. While in UAV, you can fit the path in advance, and it moves on that path. So you know what kind of information you will be collecting. So these are some of the types of UAVs. So they are being classified based on their size, small UAVs, medium UAVs, and large and more UAVs. So mostly the large and more UAVs are used in now in warfare. So we are as a nation means we are buying different kind of large UAVs from the countries to protect our boundaries. Then we have medium UAVs, so they carry the sensors which are kind of in a which are on the heavier sides, and these are with small UAVs, so uh, they are normally used to carry small sensors, small cameras. If you have any questions, you can ask the question. I'll stop and we'll discuss. And moving to its based on its size, means this is how it actually looks like. So a small UV can range in this domain as well, and we normally the quadropters, what we use comes into the category of small UVs, and then there is a very small UV as well. So these are the small UVs, and we normally use these UVs and the bunch of UVs in as swarms, and then collect the data sets. Normally, this is used for surveillance, and based on their takeoff weight, they are being also classified based on their takeoff weight. So the size small comes with a takeoff weight of, let's say, 20 lbs, and then mediums in the range of 55, and so on. So this is the basic classification of UVs to understand that how they are being classified. And normally in remote sensing, we use small UVs and medium UVs. So that's what we will be focusing. And these are the sensors which it supports. So we have visual sensors. It can support hyperspectral sensors. It can support LiDAR sensor, thermal sensor, and SAR sensor. And these images show different types of data it normally collects. So these are visual, and this is LiDAR, thermal, and then we have SAR imagery, and they have their own advantages, and these advantages are almost similar to what we have the data that we collect from uh, satellites. Only in some cases it changes. Let's say if we are trying to detect wire, or let's say the wires in forest, where it's a very tedious task to keep track of where the power lines are in a good shape or in a bad shape. So in that case, the idea of satellite is not suitable, and so is the idea of aerial surveying, where we fly it, let's say, at the height of 2 kilometers, or something like that. So in that case, UV with can help, which gives the detail of the thin wires which are which join two pylons. So those case studies changes based on what is the actual problem. So that's the whole idea. So I'll be sharing this slide so you can have a look about all these values. So these are just the example of some values. So like for thermal, I've given a ground resolution of 14 centimeter per pixel. So this is an example of one of the kind of an average kind of example based on the literature. So the resolution can change, and it can be into much finer scale as well. And the idea of why we are using UVs can be understood by its products and its implementation, where we are actually implementing it. So let's say this is an example from a study, and this study actually used UV based imagery and created a surface model out of it. And it was collected for two time scales. So the upper image, this top left image, was collected in August 2005, and this one is September 2006. And these A and B points are the two boulders which were kind of the interest areas. So the scientists wanted to study the pattern of river channel, and related to those hydrological kind of studies, where they want to study, they relate boulders movements with the channels movement. So that was the whole idea. And this kind of studies can be done only if we are actually going on field, or or we have aerial surveys with a very high resolution sensor, which is normally very costly. So in this case, they used UAV, and they prepared a digital surface model from the UAV images. And we can see in the final, this is the final DSM, which shows that the A boulder moved from A to A dash and B to B dash. And this sub centimeter level movement was being recorded or analyzed using UAV dataset. So this kind of study, which shows that how the boulder move over the years, is only possible in using such kind of data sets. And that's very important, because these studies lead to the whole idea of the way our civilization developed. So this kind of study is only possible now, and that's why this is a very big deal. This is a data set from, this is a surface model and ortho map from Drone Mapper. So this is a free data set. You can download it and see how it looks like. So let's say we are in an urban area and we want to know where actually will the flood, the water will flow in what kind of direction, and that will require actually the detail of a very high resolution detail of the elevation changes, and that can't be captured using remote sensing data if we even at the meter or meter scale. So that requires a centimeter level details, and this imagery, the surface model, if you see, it's very easier for you to identify that in which direction the river will flow. So such kind of information is required for the current decision makers to actually come up with a concrete plan. So like what I said earlier, that now we are moving into the direction. We are not in the position to afford uncertainty. So we are trying to cover up uncertainty and get more certainty in our decision making, and that requires high resolution data sets. And that's where the UAV comes into the picture. So was being captured by a Falcon UAV, which is a mid-size UAV, and its resolution was 6.6 meters, and this is the camera details. So here also there was no ground control point used for getting this surface model. These are some other images. So the top one is where people were identified in forest areas using thermal sensor mounted on a UAV, and it's very easy for us to understand that. Or studies where in the wildlife we want to track poachers and all kind of things, the animal movement. So for such data sets, for such information, we need such detail in our study, and that is being now possible by applying UAVs, by using UAVs. And the below is one of the UAV uh, the which is used to sprinkle fertilizers in agricultural field. And this is image by one of the startups in India, which is now using UAVs to spray fertilizers, and it is saving almost 50 to 60% actual cost of the farmers, and in quick time. So normally it around took around, let's say, 1 day for sprinkling the fertilizers. Now using the drones at the half cost, it's taking 20 to 25 minutes to do the same task. So, and with the precision. So you must have heard about the precision agriculture as well, where UVs are being used to uh, spread the uh, I don't remember the name. I think, yeah, it's seeds. So the UAVs are now used to distribute seeds, and to know actually uh, where it should be distributed so that it comes into a kind of straight line or a crisscross pattern. So all those things require precision, and that's where UV comes into picture. So that is now possible by UV, and it's now even more accurate than what we did in our field. It has, and when we come to data processing, it has a lot of different modules. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it is being applied in many different modules. So let's say when we are planning a route that, let's say we have a problem that our UAV should capture the images of an area in least amount of time. So where should be the route planned for the UAV? So the route planning is one of the area where AI is applied. Surveillance is one of the area where the UAV is applied, where let's say I want my UAV to fly in such a direction or in such locations where its visibility is least to the other party, but it's most to us. So in that case, view shade is an input for kind of optimizing where the route should, where be the trajectory of UAV. So those kind of different things comes into the idea of route planning. And then we have resource planning. We do data planning, that what kind of data will come from GPS, what kind of data will come from IMU, what kind of data will come from the sensors, how do we integrate it, how do we relate it. So all those things comes into data processing. Then we have post processing. So let's say I have captured the data, I have done my data planning, I have done all those pre-processing tasks. Now I want to extract information out of it. So let's say I'm trying to extract the information of how many number of humans are there in this thermal imagery, or can I find out whether they are carrying any illegal a weapon in with them. So we can see that they look like they are carrying a bag on their shoulders. So that is the level of detail that we need, and that's the part of post processing. And there are other different activities in the data processing what a UV generates, and AI comes into picture in all of these modules. And the processing pipeline, when we say processing pipeline so we'll be mostly looking at the data processing post processing part, where we have collected the data set. So this is a data set of uh, UV which has red, green, and an IR region. It was collected in these bands, so has near infrared, red and green bands. So that's why it's looking into it kind of red format. So you must have learned in your previous lectures about the false curve composite, and so this is a false curve composite. So we can see the vehicles moving there, the smoke, the tracks, all those things are moving, and this is from the area of nearby area of Pune. So I was also involved in the collection of this data, and the Langster UAV was being used to capture the data, and it has a resolution of 9 meters, and it was there was no ground control point used for this collecting this data. So when no, so we will see what was the processing pipeline which we use. So, and this is actually the common pipeline which is used by almost every data analyst or the person who wants to extract some information. So this was the imagery which was taken. Then this is the acquisition location. So as we have our GPS mounted on our system on our UAV, we have our IMU mounted on our UAV. So now I know what is the location of my UAVs. So these are the actual locations which are being plotted, and these locations either can be planned during the flight, or you can give the direct input flight plot input to the UAV, and based on its power and all those flight timing, it gives you first it asks you that what is the flight plan, and then you input the location's trajectory information. Let's say it's around, let's say, 10 kilometers, so it will give you a detail that I have a battery backup of, let's say, 30 minutes, and if you fly me at a speed, let's say 15 kilometers per hour, then I won't be able to cover such kind of locations. So these locations won't be covered. So all those plannings are being done in flight planning. So there you do optimization of how to actually plan UAV in a better way to collect the data set. So that's also a module of AI which is used in UAVs. The right image, this image is actually the type points generated from the camera position. So now these are the images which were taken at from these different locations. These are the camera locations, and these are the images that were taken, and from these, in these images we generated the type points. So now we have the type points, we know what features lie, the common features lie in different images. So then we generate the different outputs such as point cloud. So from those type points, we have the point cloud, and then we generate this surface model and automosaic images well. So this is the actual pipeline. You collect the data. Before collecting, you have the detail of flight planning. Then when you collect it, then you do some processing. The one of the part of the processing for generating point cloud is matching type points, collecting the actual points, and then you come up with this output, and then you use it in your research purpose. Let's say DSM can be used in different domains, so you must have learned all those things. And at the end, when we talk about the feature extraction, or when we say that I want to extract some kind of information from the image, so this then left one is the UV image from the same area, and the right one is the classified image using a CNN model. So CNN is a machine learning model, and we will come to that model. So we will reach here. So this slide says we will reach here. So we will know, we will learn that how, when this is an input, how we get here. So this image shows that how even the shadows are being classified in a with a very high resolution. So we see this is the shadow, and these are its classified outputs. So this is the level of detail we can get from the data sets. So when I say we will reach here, so we must start with the artificial intelligence part. So we learned about what is UAV, and we now know that what kind of processing is being done on the UAV data set while collecting, before collecting, after collection. So when now we will be looking at after the AI techniques such as machine learning, which is done when we do after the collection on the image data set. So machine learning is also done the other aspects as well, the other different modules as well, but we will be focusing more on acquisition, the extracting information from the image. So before actually implementing that part, we must understand what is AI, we must understand what is machine learning, and what are the components of machine learning, what actually is learning, and how do we implement it. So what I will be going through, what I will take you through is I will introduce you what is AI, then I will introduce you what is learning in machine learning, then I will introduce you to neural network, machine learning model, and then I will again build upon that and detail you about the CNN model, and I will show how it is being implemented. Okay, so AI is a research field which has been since 1930s. So in 1940s, actually, the name AI strike it was discussed in the research community, and in that period in the era of 1950s, it was being coined. So the term AI was coined in that domain, and the definition of term AI is kind of very philosophical. So people have their own definitions. Some say we want to mimic human, but in that case we are kind of limiting the intelligence to humans. So we are saying that let's say dolphin is not intelligent, or let's say when we say that a person is going to do suicide, so is that intelligence? So when we say that, we are kind of limiting the intelligence. So means even though let's say that is the definition, what we understand that our we want to build a system which kind of functions in the way our brain functions. So our goal is to create a computer intelligence through programming which becomes or works in such a format that in the format in which we work, we work, and in that case we limit the term intelligence to a term known as rational intelligence. That means doing the right thing instead of doing all things. So let's say if I don't want to build a machine which does suicide by mimicking a human. So in that case, the in that though that part we won't call it intelligent act. So we will be limiting it to a rational act. So the things which are right to do. So AI is defined in the terms of rational behavioral agents. So those the entities which do the right thing. And the whole idea of artificial intelligence is divided into three different domains. And the first one is AI search. So this was the first major idea of artificial intelligence. So the idea of AI which was being coined was generalizing a problem. So let's say I have a problem of let's say finding a shortest truth. So I have some inputs, and then I have a black box, and then I have an output. So in that case, the black box has to be AI. And the AI here is generalizing the whole idea of a problem. So let's say I'll for solving that problem, I'll be giving some start states, and then I'll be saying that at each state you have one function, and then it will give another states. States represent the condition. Let's say you are playing with you are playing a chess. So every state, every new move is a new state for the chess. So that's the idea of state. And then you have a goal test. So when you say that I'll be testing whether this is the final state, so I say stop. So that's the idea of generalizing any problem in form of search, and that was the idea of AIS search. So in that case, we had different algorithms of searching. Let's say DFS, BFS, A star. So there are a lot of things, genetic algorithms. So a lot of thing has been done in this domain of AI. So that is the idea of AIS search, where we are defining a generalized environment, or we are formulating a generic representation of a problem. So each problem, any kind of problem, and that was the idea of AI developers, that any problem can be solved using AI representation. Then came the AI as representation, where when people found out that search can be very extensive, so let's represent a problem in different ways. So the prepositional logic or such kind of representations were used to actually pass on the information that was being taken by the uh, learning agent or machine. So if I say it's raining, and if it's raining, then the the road will be slippery, and then that implies that there's a chance that you will fall. That information is fed to machine. So now related to robot, when a robot sensor identifies a wet road, then it has the information, its knowledge base, that if the road is wet, then it will be slippery, and then I don't have to move. So that was the whole idea of representation. So each problem was represented as some kind of using some language, and then it was fed to machine. But they have it has its own problem, because there was a less uncertainty involved in that. It was not able to represent or capture all the possibilities. So whatever you feed, it will take, and then there was the idea that how much information you will be giving to the robot. So then came the idea of learning. So instead of feeding or spoon feeding everything to machine, let's include the idea of learning, and let machine learn from what it has sensed. So let's say we have a robot, and it's moving in our home, and it sees, let's say, a dirt. So maybe if the first time it won't identify it as a dirt, but in the due of learning, based on some knowledge, it will learn that this needs to be cleaned. So that's the idea of AI's learning. So that made machine more intelligent. And when I say intelligent, it's from the sense of human being, because that's where means a lot of researchers coined a definition at. So we'll be looking at AI as learning, and we'll be looking at some of the uh, mostly used machine learning models, and we'll learn the idea of learning in the context of neural networks. But the overall context of learning, we'll be looking at it now. So this is a very simple example which I thought of. Means every time if somebody asks me what is learning, what is machine learning, so I give them this example. So, and I believe this happened or happens every time with all of us, at least once in our lifetime. So when we talk to our parents, or especially mother, means we call them, and just by how we speak to her, she knows that whether we are suffering from cold, cough, fever, whatever. So she knows you, and means what kind of disease is means uh, leading me to act like that. So that's based on what she collected over the years. So she knows us, she has seen us from our childhood, that what kind of voice quality, what kind of topics I generally take up while interacting, how much time I interact when I am suffering from cold or fever or anything. So that's the data that she used over the years to train her brain, and that's the actual knowledge base or learning that she uses. So every time when I call her, she has those informations in her mind, and some processing goes on, and then she comes up with the idea that are you suffering from cold, and we then are shocked, and we ask that how do you know. So that's actually learning, and where she and we want to mimic it. And when we try to mimic it, so instead of our mother, if we replace it by a machine, the whole brain will be a machine, and whatever she does inside her machine to kind of relate your voice quality, topics, time, interest, let's say frequency, if we quantify that, then all the frequency, all those things, all those that goes inside in the brain, is that is the algorithm, which the data on which it works. And then she does is a prediction. So that's the whole idea of machine learning. So you learn from the current things, and then you tell something about the future. And the idea of prediction is related to how efficient is the prediction, and that depends on learning. So let's say uh, I have, or anyone has not lived with her mother, and in that case there might be a scenario where she doesn't have those learning information. Let's say if we don't interact for 5 years, so she doesn't know that what kind of topics we take now, or what kind of voice quality happens when I have cold. So in that case, that means that it, what the efficiency of her prediction depends on what kind of data she has analyzed. So if she has been with you with since long years or since many years, then it's obvious that her prediction is good. That's what the idea of learning is. And the useful changes that she makes in her mind is she relates the type of voice quality, topics, time, interest is the learning that actually goes on. And we'll see what in the context of machine this means. So when we say machine, that means we are kind of mathematically formalizing the process. So we can say that learning denotes the changes in a system that enables it to do the some task more efficiently the next time. And that means, say in the mathematical term, let's say we are developing a model of mother's brain, means how our mother is predicting this. So in that case, let's say x1 is a variable voice pitch, x2 is talking time, and x3 is interest level. So those are the variables. So interest level can be categoric, so you can be uh, very interested, less interested, so that can be a categorical variable. And then talking time can be minutes, voice pitch can be frequency. So you have those variables. And now you say that I will have different parameters, and when the output, the y, the dependent variable is 1, that means you have cough, 2 when it's cold, and 0 when it's you are fit. So based on all those data sets, let's say you have a CSV file, you have the entries of voice pitch in one column, talking time in another column, and interest level in the third column. You develop this mathematical model. So that's the actual representation of your mother's prediction phenomenon. So based on that data set, you can train this model. And when we say train this model, that means I am saying doing useful changes. And when I say useful changes, that means I am telling about changing the parameter value A, B, and C. So you have the value of x1 with you, you have the value of x2 with you, you have the value of x3 with you, and you have a value of y of 1. It can be 1, 2, or 0. Only thing you want to know is whether the parameters a, b, and c. So these are the useful changes that has to be done to come up with a final mathematical model, which you can say that this is mimicking my mother's brain. So that's how you can relate the machine learning, machines learning to your mother's learning. And that can be is a term that is a very the very process that we know as a learning. And this whole process is called machine learning, on based on how learning is done using various models, algorithms. And it's a computational arrangement for machines. And we will see what does that means. We will see in coming two slides, just 2 3 slides. But before that, we just need to define what is AL, ML, and DL. So these are the terms which are most heard nowadays. So we have artificial intelligence. So it's the idea of developing a system which can behave like a human. ML is a specific branch of AI, which I means we just discussed in the earlier slide, that after search, or then we have representation, then we have the learning module. So the learning is a sub branch of artificial intelligence. That's where the machine learning lies, and deep learning is a specific part of machine learning where we say that. The feature extraction, what we normally do in machine learning. So you manually go and assign that this is this. You have extracted the feature out of the image, and then you feed it to a model. Now in deep learning, you merge those things, and we do the feature extraction as well. And we will means you can note down this, and you will understand this whole idea after a few slides when I say when we're discussing about CNN, that what actually is feature extraction and what does deep means in deep learning algorithms. So that was some definitions. All those algorithms, so let's say the algorithm of learning lies in three different domains: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. So mostly we tend to use supervised learning, but I believe the future will be unsupervised learning, because there is a lot of data coming and there will be less resources to label those data. So when I say label, that means I have data with labels. So that means here in this problem, for each entry of x1, x2, and x3, I have an entry of y, which is whether it's 1, whether it's 2, or whether it's 0. So that is the label. So when I say this, I say that I have labeled this entry, and that's what comes with supervised learning. So you give the data x1, x2, x3 information with labels, which is y. So you are feeding this to a machine, and machine changes its parameter value to come up with a mathematical model or representation of how we relate x1, x2, x3, and say that, okay, this is the model. Now, based on that learning that we'll be looking in the next slide, I am trained now. And when I say trained, we'll know what is the meaning of training here. In the context of our mother, training means based on the data, she says that now I'm good enough to predict that whether you have cold or cough. So that's the meaning of trained here. And that's the meaning of trained in algorithms as well. And in the mathematical format, we will see what is the meaning of training. Then comes the unsupervised learning. So you don't give label with the data. So when you don't give the label with data, you identify the patterns that which data is similar. So when x1, x2 is similar, x2, x1, x2, x3 are similar valued. So you know that these lie in from the same distribution. Some other values lie from the different distribution. So those things are known as clusters, and it can be used to in when you have a completely new image. In those cases, you might use unsupervised learning to form a cluster and find out that what can be the different kind of features which form cluster. The values, let's say we have building information, road information, and let's say grass information. So the pixels of grass will be one cluster. So when I do this thing, I know that there are three classes. So when I do supervised learning, when I assign labels, then I know in advance that these can be the labels. So that's where unsupervised learning lies. Or if you don't have the label, in that case, obviously you are going to be using unsupervised learning. Reinforcement learning is one branch which actually depends on machine agents. So when your machine does some prediction, you assign critique to it. It gives feedback whether the value was correct or how much it was wrong, and based on that, it learns over the time. So in this example, let's say your agent is moving from this to this, and let's say it takes the first step in this direction. So based on its distance from its goal, you say that this step is not good, so you give some penalty to it, or you reward it if it takes this direction, the first step in this direction. So from here to here, if it takes this direction, you assign another penalty because it might get stuck in the loop. So that's how reinforcement learning works. Okay, and just to give a detail of supervised learning, so means when we have our supervised learning, then I know that these are red dots, these are stars, these are squares. So I know what is the y value here. In unsupervised learning, I don't know what are these values, but I know that these values are alike. So I put them in the clusters and I say that these are the things. So in the case of machine, let's say I am the person who is giving the label. So I say that when the machine says this is this banana, then I say him, no, this is not a banana. This is a apple. This is an apple. So that's where I am supervising the machine. I am giving that label apple to the input. So, and that input can be, let's say, color, the shape, what the machine is looking, and machine is reading the color and information, and then it's saying that this is banana, but I have given a label to it that this is an apple. And then in unsupervised learning, machine itself finds out that these things look alike. So let's put them in different cluster and then say that okay, these are alike, and then it's your task to come back and say that this is banana and this is apple. How do we do that? How actually the process of learning happens? How actually it is implemented? So you have data, you have the universal data, you split it into training and testing, and then the training is observed, you know this, and then testing is unobserved. So your machine trains on this training data, and this is being applied to test data, and then you come up with the metric that how good it was in when we apply to test data. And this is the process through which it goes. So let's suppose this was an image, and we give this training set. So we assign this training set that this is let's say sugar beet, this is a forest, and this is so such kind of information was being fed to machine. So machine knows that if the value of pixel lies in this ranges, then this is a sugar beet now, because this person has given me this detail that this range is sugar beet. And all these informations are split into training and test. So machine learns over this. So there can be different algorithms, these are the outputs of different algorithm, and then it learns. Then you apply the test, you select the test set, and then you test whether your machine has learned enough or not. So if you have learned enough, you would be in a state to predict with high accuracy. Okay, so we will take a 5-minute break, and then when we'll come back, we will start with the idea of how machine learns. We will link it to neural networks, and then we will see the demonstration of how this is being implemented. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Vaibhav. This is for all the participants. We'll take a short break before we start with our session two on hands-on on learning exercise. We'll do a small exercise. So I will join back in 10 minutes.
Thanks, ma'am. Thank you.
If you all have any queries, you may write it down, or before starting the hands-on, we can have a query session.
Absolutely.
Question answers, right?
All right, ma'am. So how long the break is going to be? 45 minutes?
No.
No. Yes, Vaibhav.
So we will take a 5 minutes break, and we will continue with this. So we won't be going in the 1:45 to 3:45 session. Instead, we will finish up this by 2:15.
Okay. So there is a question from a participant. Do we need any software for this, or?
No. Actually, I planned this for means where you could have used softwares, but actually it requires some coding. So I thought that maybe the time is not adequate to teach you all those aspects of coding. So I will do it at my end, and I'll explain you each step.
Okay.
Then Samir asks, do the UVs can be used for sample collection? Sample collection in sense means if you can elaborate, then it will be kind of more clear for me. Air quality. Yes, means whatever you collect is a sample. After you collect a sample, you kind of put it in the bracket of whether you are using it as a ground truth or no. But at the first instance of any collected data is a sample. So you have different sensors which can collect the information of particulate matter in air. So that is being done.
Also, one participant had asked, what are the chances that we lost connection with the UAVs, and then what damage?
Yeah. Means there are 2-3 different ways we actually plan UAV. So first is when we do planning, we have let's say a software at our end where a person in the same way we fly our aeroplane. So we first it's in the automatic way in the mode, and then we can manually control it. So once that happens, and if suppose the connection is not lost, then it's completely fine. When we say the connection is lost, then in that case we have a smart chip which is deployed in UAV. So it has a kind of auto planner. So every second it checks whether the connection is up or not. When the connection is down, so in that case the actual plan which was flight plan which was being planned before actually going to the field, that is being fed into UAV, and UAV maneuvers it and collects the data based on that plan. In the case where if that system also fails, where it can't access its route plan, then there might be a possibility that it can fly arbitrarily, because that's also an uncertainty which is also fed as a intelligent module in the UAVs. And if 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 it is if it failed to identify a flight path, then it is normally given the path, arbitrary path, and that's then now it's being linked to real-time sensing. So let's say a UAV senses when it has no connection, then it looks for arbitrary path, and at each time step it senses the environment. So if suppose in one image it finds at the end of UAV, it does the processing, and if it finds out that this is let's say forest, then it moves in that direction. So those things as a smart maneuvering is being fed into UAV. So those things happen, but yes, can be a chance where because there is an element of uncertainty. So yes, there can be a chance of kind of moving into the residential civilian blocks. So yes, that can happen, but it has not been reported yet because it's very well planned.
Good afternoon, sir. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sir, in the last slide, you just showed the labeling of the data. So in that, you said that depending upon the pixel values, it is labeled as whether it is wheat or forest or river, like that. So what are the range of how do we come to know what is the range of the pixel values for sugar or wheat?
Yeah. So there are 2-3 things. So first, when we collect the information, then we go to ground and collect the actual samples, and then there is a term called spectral signature.
Okay.
Supriya, can you please mute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
So we have the term called spectral signature. So each object has its own signature of how it reflects the electromagnetic wave. So let's say ground reflects in a different way, it absorbs some quantity, reflects. Similar is the case with different agriculture part as well. So wheat reflects in a different kind of way, and then the different agricultural things reflect in a different way. So we study those spectral signatures. So we have initially it is being done using a spectrogram. So we have a handheld spectrogram. We go to field and then we collect its spectral signature, or we have images and we go to the ground, and then we for each pixel we identify whether this was wheat or not. So when this is being done, we have a database of spectral signatures, and in future we know that what kind of spectral signature corresponds to what object. So that is being that's how we do the labeling of those things.
Sir, in this, is there any standard, pixel values like for this forest, this river, and sugar, wheat, or it depends upon the image from where you have from study area?
That totally depends on your study area. So there can be case, let's say if we have water, then we know that it is going to be dark in thermal imagery and or in NIR imagery, and its value will be going towards 0. So that's means that those are things which we know about certain elements, certain objects. But let's say if we want to know whether this is wheat or this is grass, then in that case normally people do the field verification, because that changes with different kind of data sets. So each sensor has its own data, each has its own resolution, it has its own property of capturing the electromagnetic wave, so that changes with the sensor.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it correctly, so before labeling, we have to do the groundwork, and then only we'll be able to categorize those pixels according to the correct labels, right, sir?
Yeah, that is the correct way of working. Otherwise, you based on its feature details, you can by looking at the image, you know that okay, this is ground, this is wheat, this is sugar cane. So by looking at the image, you can also do the same, but there might be case that there can be some ambiguity. So in that case, there will be some error. So if you can have a trade-off with error and your field resources, then you can go with the second approach. So those things are done. There are past databases as well, which are being prepared based on the similar kind of values. So those are being also used in creating such a label data set.
Okay, and if the only one image of one particular tile, is it enough for CNN to train all those pixel values? One image is enough?
Image in the sense, no, it's not depend. It doesn't depend on image. It depends on what are you feeding from that image to the model. So we will look at this in detail. So there is a whole detail of how the CNN will work, what the image size can impact. All those things will be discussed in the coming 1 hour.
Yes, sir.
So you
Thank
will
you
get
so
that
much.
answer. If after that you feel that you didn't get that point, then please do ask this question again. But I
Yes, sir.
hope that will be helpful.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So we will start with the second part.
Dear participants, can we start with our session 2? This was a request from our expert that we can have a training session in continuation with the lecture, so that and then we can have a break.
No, but proximity, what do you mean? Proximity.
Okay. So we are starting with our session 2.
Yes, ma'am, we can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.